All right, so we're following this live event for you. Justin Trudeau is in Vaughan, Ontario. It's a big suburb north of Toronto. Stephen Del Duca there is the mayor of Vaughan. Big announcement on housing. This is part of a series of announcements the government has been coming out with recently to show that they are trying to deal with the affordability crisis, the housing crisis in our country. You're watching CTV News Channel. I'm Todd Vanderheyden. Good to have you with us from across the country on this Thursday. CTV's Rachel Aiello has been following this. She's joining us from Ottawa, listening in a number of different topics. Rachel, at the end there, of course, the issue of parental rights that Justin Trudeau was talking about, some questions about some of the Muslim community being angry over comments he made about them. But let's start off with housing. And this is really a big issue for the government now. They're getting hammered by the Conservatives over the issue of the housing crisis nationwide. So another city, this time Vaughan, signing on to what's known as the Housing Accelerator program in the government terms.
Yeah, so this was the second announcement from the federal government on this housing accelerator. We saw a few weeks back in London, Ontario, when the Liberals were meeting with their caucus, they announced the first housing accelerator deal with London, Ontario. At the time, the government tried to frame this, Todd, as their first plank of this new housing plan. But in reality, what it is finally this years-long commitment is coming to fruition. So they've done some work behind the scenes, and now they're one by one essentially going across the country. We can clearly expect to see more announcements like this, regional specific announcements. They're targeting these, going to these ridings or going to these regions and making these housing announcements as the government is trying to really solidify their focus on this issue of a housing affordability. It's been something that we've been talking about for months, if not the better part of a year, something the government says they've been on since they were in government, but under recent pressure from Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, they've really tried to refocus on this issue. So what we saw today was kind of the next city announcement, and what I expect will be a number of these housing announcements meant to cut red tape, prioritize housing that is affordable and located near public transit.
Yeah, so the message here is, look, we understand we're trying to accelerate housing as best we can. So you've got Vaughan, you've got London, Ontario, but a long way to go, Rachel, because we know there are huge housing issues in places right across the country, primarily major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Ottawa, Montreal, and on it goes.
Yeah, and we heard the Prime Minister there talk about another initiative they're trying to get through. In the House of Commons right now, MPs are debating a bill that has two aims. One is the Grocery Prices Competition Board side, but the other part of that piece of legislation, Todd, is this GST removal for rental builds. So the Prime Minister there was accusing the Conservatives of holding it up. It's still at second reading. I think his interpretation of them obstructing debate is they haven't passed it through more quickly. The Liberals want this to advance so they can get that measure in place. But what this would do, Todd, is remove the GST on new rental housing builds, and talking there about wanting to incentivize builders to pick back up on projects that perhaps pandemic delays had made them feel less appealing. So that's another initiative the government is trying to advance. And as you noticed, no shortage of politicization and both sides trying to fight for who's got the best ideas on the housing front.